Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us at today's Transit Working Group coffee chat. We're going to get started in a few seconds. While folks are logging on, I'm just going to go over the guidelines for today's discussion. So if you could rename yourself to include your first name, last name, and any affiliation, you can feel free to mute and unmute yourself to participate in the discussion. The chat box will also be open. You can also use the raise hand function if you'd rather request to speak than just jump in. You can find this by clicking on the participants button at the bottom of the screen, and a window will pop up with the raise hand button, and you can then unmute yourself. Some newer versions of Zoom require you to select the reactions button to find raise hand. If you're on the phone, you can use *9 to raise your hand. And if you have any technical difficulties, you can contact my colleague Matt Archer via the chat. marcher@ctps.org or 857-702-3708. And I'll also be available via the chat during the conversation. So with that, I think I'm going to send it over to Sandy to do a little, intros first. Got it. So I think we're going to go, Sandy, are you going to do
I can do a little bit about this chat first. And
Sorry.
Yeah, so welcome everybody, and thank you for spending your afternoon, your last few minutes of the dying sunlight with us. The Boston Region Metropolitan Planning Organization, or MPO, has convened, the Transit Working Group, which I manage, to help improve coordination among transit providers in the Boston region and represent transit more fully in MPO activities and decisions. I'm going to put a link to the page for the Transit Working Group in the chat. The Transit Working Group holds large, full attendance meetings roughly quarterly, but we've also been holding these informal coffee chats, as we call them, on specific topics that are of interest to the membership on a regular basis. We did some in the spring, and we've been doing them now in the fall and winter, and we think they're pretty great. So today is going to be about closing gaps in our regional transit network, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. But for now, I will throw it back to Roisin to do some introductions.
Awesome, thanks, Sandy. So I think what I'm going to do is introduce myself, and then I'll just go down the participants list and call on folks, and you can unmute yourself and introduce yourself. So I'm Roisin Foley. I am a communications associate at MPO staff. I use she or hers, and I will throw it to Matt Archer.
Hey everyone, I'm Matt Archer. I'm a transportation planner with the Boston Region MPO. I use he, him, his pronouns, and I'm hosting today's meeting. And I'll throw it back to Roisin.
Thanks, Matt. Sandy, did you already introduce yourself when you said?
I can introduce myself briefly, and I think most folks here know me. Sandy Johnston, he, him, his. I'm a transportation planner with the Boston MPO, and among other things, I manage the Transit Working Group and organize these coffee chats.
Awesome. Thanks, Sandy. So next on the list is Colette.
Hi, my name is Colette Frank, and I just renamed myself. I'm a member of the Select Board in Wellesley, and my assignment is transportation, and so I'm working right now on a sustainable mobility plan, and you're just working really closely with the RTAs and safe routes to schools and things like that.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us. And I think next up is Annika.
Hi guys, Annika Laszlo from the MTAs. I'm the Director of Coordinated Mobility, and I have been actually working with coordination issues even before I joined the T. I was the statewide mobility manager for about 5 years at MassDOT.
Awesome, thanks. Next is Bill.
Hi, I'm Bill McNulty. I'm Principal Transportation Planner at Old Colony Planning Council, the MPO south of Boston. My pronouns are he, him, his, and I'm just here to see how we can better coordinate regionally and fill in some of the gaps in the service.
Awesome, thanks. Next is Charles.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Charles Kilmer. I'm he, him, and I'm the Assistant Director and Transportation Program Manager with the Colony Planning Council. And as my colleague Bill mentioned, we're here to learn some more of the subject matter expert. And I'd like to give a shout out to Glenn Ann Geiler from Brockton Area Transit for introducing us to this excellent transit working group.
Awesome. Thanks for joining us. Next is Austin.
Hi, everyone. Austin Saganos from the town of Acton.
And Austin is one of the MPO board members who's joining us today, just so folks know. Next is, I know Amira, you just joined us, so if you're still working on your audio, I can skip you, but we're just going through a round of intros if you want to unmute and introduce yourself.
Hi, Glennon Geiler. I'm the grants manager for Brockton Area Transit Authority.
Thanks, Glenn. Amira, are you able to unmute? I'll come back. Emily?
Hi, everyone. Emily Van der Westine. I'm she, her, and I am the Director of Fixed Route, Intermodal, and Marketing at the Metro West Regional Transit Authority.
Thanks. And next we've got Franny.
Hi, Franny Osmond, she, her, and I'm from Acton Transportation Committee and also on the Lowell Regional Transit Authority Board and the Magic Subregion of the Metropolitan Area Planning Council.
Great, thanks. Jeff?
Hi, I'm Jeff Bennett. I'm the Senior Shuttle Services Manager with the 128 Business Council. We're the TMA in the Western 128 area from Lexington, Waltham, and Needham.
Thanks. Lisa?
Hi, I'm Lisa Weber. My pronouns are she, her, and I'm the Transportation Compliance and Quality Assurance Coordinator for the Human Service Transportation Office, part of EOHHS.
Thanks, Lisa. Cool, looks like Amira is ready. You wanna do your intro?
Hi, everyone. Sorry for the technical difficulty. My name is Amira. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am a transportation planner for the MBTA Advisory Board. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Amira. And Amira is another one of the MPO board representatives joining us today. How about Melissa next?
Hi, everyone. My name is Melissa Droulet. My pronouns are she, her, hers. And I work for the MBTA, where I'm the Senior Director of Service Planning. So we're responsible for the planning and scheduling for the fixed route services that we operate ourselves. So that would be our bus and subway services. We have others who are handling ferry and commuter rail and some of our other modes. But thank you.
Awesome, thanks. Next is Olivia.
Hi, everyone. I'm Olivia Mobaid, she, her. I work with Melissa, so I'm one of the MBTA service planners focusing on bus transportation. My area that I kind of cover is on the far reaches of the MBTA system, think like between Burlington and Watertown, and more interior, think like Somerville, Cambridge, that type of area. So happy to be here.
Awesome, thanks. Next up, we have Rachel.
Hi, everyone. Rachel Fichtenbaum with Mass Mobility, which is a statewide transportation information sharing initiative out of the Executive Office of Health and Human Services.
Thanks, Rachel. Next up, we have Robert.
Hello, everyone. I'm Robert Guptill. I'm the Director of Service Planning at the MBTA, pronouns he, him, his, and I work with Melissa as well. Happy to be here.
Thanks a lot. Next, we have Shona.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Shona Norman. I'm the Transit Program and Compliance Manager at the Cape Ann Transportation Authority. My pronouns are she, her, and hers. And I work side by side with the CADA's Administrator, Felicia Webb.
Awesome, thank you. Next up, we have Stephanie.
I am Stephanie Cronin. I run the Middlesex 3 Coalition, which is a public-private partnership working with businesses from Lexington up to the New Hampshire border. And we started the Middlesex 3 Transportation Management Association to get our workers to work. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, thanks. Next, we have Susan.
Hi everyone, my name's Susan Barrett. She, her, hers. I'm the transportation manager for the town of Lexington. And what that means here is that, what's a few things. I oversee a little public bus service that's been operating since 1979. It's called Lexpress. It's wedged between the Lowell Regional Transit Authority and the MBTA. And we also have demand response service, in addition to doing some other things like MBTA youth passes, senior Charlie cards and the like, and safe routes to school. Thank you.
Awesome, thanks, Susan. And I think I skipped Kelly. Would you like to go ahead, Kelly?
I think Kelly just arrived.
Okay. Okay, we can give Kelly a minute to settle in and go ahead and get started with the discussion.
All right, so Matt, if you want to skip ahead to, excellent. All right, so I think this is a terrific group, and thank you everybody again for coming out. This chat really has a couple of goals. First is to discuss strategies for coordination between all of the different transit providers and other entities that are present here. And the second is to identify specific gaps and opportunities for collaborative planning and operations. And I suppose I should add capital implementation to that as well. So kind of a thematic element as well as a very practical one. And I figure we'll just kind of see where the discussion goes in terms of the balance between those two things. Matt, would you like to forward to the next slide? So before we launch into the discussion, I just want to say we are recording this chat primarily for internal purposes. If no one objects, we will also put it up on the MPO's YouTube channel. But if anybody here is not comfortable with us doing that, please do let us know and then we won't post it. You can just let us know in the chat or you can say it out loud right now. But we do have several discussion questions that I wanted to get to today and really would like to open it up to the floor to discuss these. But we can start with the first one. So starting with the specific, then we can zoom out a little bit. What are some specific locations, corridors, or areas where transit riders may experience gaps and or disjointed service? So some of you, represent transit operators, some of you represent TMAs, some of you represent the riders directly. And we'd really like to hear from you about specific areas where you're hearing that there are needs around coordination and collaboration, where you might have heard that things are a little bit rough for the riders on our kind of regional transit network. That's the kind of identifying those areas, those locations, the first step toward being able to ameliorate those difficulties and fix those problems. So does anybody have a specific area or location they'd like to bring up? And you can unmute yourself and talk out loud, or you can raise your hand using the Zoom function.
I have an area that we've always battled with because I represent the city of Lowell down to Burlington. And I know I've worked with a number of you guys on this as well too, just trying to get workers from our gateway city down to the restaurants in the Burlington area. And it really just had to do with that the LRTA doesn't represent Burlington and that the funding doesn't come from Burlington. So it's a little harder to make some of those connections as well too. I mean, I can go on because there's certainly a lot of other ones like getting from Lawrence over to, but that's not really your area either. But I'll stick with the Lowell to Burlington one for now. How's that?
Okay.
Thanks,
and we're
Ed.
always happy to hear about other things, even if it's not strictly in our region. We are, on the other end of the region, we are very happy to be joined by our colleagues from OCPC. But yes, I have heard, obviously, Stephanie, we've talked before, and I have heard about the Lowell Burlington need as well. And
I will, oh, I see Franny's hands up as well, because I've talked with her as well too about bringing people from the Acton area over to the community colleges. And that's been pre-COVID. This is all pre-COVID, right? That was a big issue. And I'm sure Franny can pick up that conversation as well.
Sure. So let's go to Franny and then we'll go to Colette.
Yeah, I was gonna say that travel between the Acton area and Middlesex Community College is one that's needed. Two others that I would like to mention is the route between LRTA and MWRTA, going from Lowell to Framingham. It goes by so many places of interest, several market baskets, nursing homes, senior centers, right? You name it, places that people want to go along that route, and especially including places that employees from those cities might want to go to in between. So making that connection between those two cities. And also, I would love to see more coordination between some of our local routes, such as our CAT bus. It's a cross Acton transit. It's just a fixed route that we have in our town, and or our rail shuttle, which neither of the fixed routes have been running since the pandemic, but working with Lowell Regional Transit Authority I would love to have those be under the Lowell Regional Transit Authority. It seems like extra overhead and extra siloing to have Acton have to hire a separate company, have to work with a TMA, as opposed to the RTA helping run those outskirt trips, those outskirt services. Thanks.
Yeah, thank you, Franny. And certainly, the MPO wants to play that coordinating role, and we're very concerned about this kind of fragmentation effect that often happens when everybody's kind of meeting their own needs, and not in a malicious way, but just that's what's available. And it can be hard to coordinate these regional efforts and get everything done. So, I know Colette raised her hand a while ago. I just want to give Emily from MWRTA, not to put you on the spot, but if you wanted to say anything about service that you're thinking about going up in the direction of Lowell and up from Framingham, since that's your area of responsibility, I wanted to give you the opportunity to respond a little bit if you want to, but no, don't feel obligated.
Yeah, definitely a little on the spot. So I don't know if I have anything amazing to say, but I mean, we are certainly, we're always interested in connecting with other RTAs in any way that we can. I know that Lowell is pretty out there. Is your thought connecting maybe somewhere in Maynard, or did you have any specific thought in mind? I mean, I would love to.
Yes, including Sudbury, Maynard.
Maynard.
Especially Maynard is a real big need area, and Acton, and then
Absolutely.
either Littleton or Chelmsford.
Yeah, I mean,
Westford,
I know we
Littleton, Westford, or which is sticky because Littleton's part of MART, but that's part of the whole inter-RTA coordination.
Right. Yeah, I mean, definitely finding ways to connect between LRTA and MART would be fantastic. Maynard, I know, has been a thought within MWRTA as well. So yeah, I would definitely love to discuss different options and ways that we could make that happen. We would certainly be interested in coordinating something.
I always dream of asking the communities to pitch in some from town funds in addition to the RTA funds to sort of put it all together.
I know some towns have devoted their TNC funds to that, which I imagine out in some of the smaller towns might not amount to enough to make a huge difference. But that is, a revenue stream that I know some places have used. All right, so let's go to Colette, who's had her hand up for a while.
Thanks, Sandy. And Emily's going to laugh when I say this because she's heard me say it 10 times. But, one of the things I think that we're missing is maybe connections between places like, Wellesley, Natick, Weston to Cambridge or Watertown or wherever our people are working. And so I think there's a data gap of trying to understand where are our people who are in our towns working to and not taking transit to, and especially if there's going to be a lot of work on the Mass Pike with the Alston interchange at some point in the future, can we get those people out of cars and onto transit to make that better? But it's a question, and I know we've touched on this before, that it's across RTA jurisdictions, but people who are taking transport, the RTA jurisdictions are, they're not always aware of that. So you're just trying to get from where you live to where you work. And when it's across RTA, I think there could be more, there's an opportunity to get people out of their cars onto the RTAs. And I'm just sort of thinking now as international travels and is opening up more, or just even air travels opening up more, things like direct connections to the Framingham to Boston airport connection. There should be an easy connection for anybody who's taking that trip to get to the bus rather than driving to the airport. So things like that come to mind.
Yeah, thank you, Colette. And that definitely brings in several municipalities and a couple of the smaller RTAs as well as the MBTA. I don't know if either of our MBTA representatives want to say anything about how those considerations may play into the bus network redesign process or any of your other service planning changes. Again, not to put you on the spot, don't feel obligated, but if you had anything to say.
Yeah, I know, Melissa here. We're looking at a number of changes as part of our bus network redesign process to define kind of new routes based on where people are actually traveling. Though, to be honest, so far it's really focused on places that are within the MBTA service area, because we recognize there are a lot of gaps within our service area. So we haven't done as much looking at the sort of intra-RTA or inter-RTA types of trips, and especially some of those might be a combination of kind of local bus and also rail. We have others who are looking at regional rail and looking at making all-day frequencies, so it's not really so focused on the commuters, but getting it so that people can take a variety of trips. So this kind of spans a number of different efforts.
Yeah, we've definitely seen the benefit of the regional rail immediately, but it's just trying to have people have that one trip to get them, having one trip to get you to the Framingham shuttle to the airport rather than have two connections. At that point, people just start to drive.
Yeah. Well, we should try and recruit somebody from Massport to come to these chats to talk about the Logan shuttles. So, all right. Well, thank you, Melissa and Colette. Let's go to Susan.
Hi there. So one of the gaps is also, let me just lower my hand while I think of it, is evening and weekends. So in Lexington, for example, we have absolutely no transit service on a Sunday, no MBTA service, none of our little express service. Evenings service tends to end pretty early before many of our restaurant workers, are getting out. And then the other thing is, I would say, just more north-south connections. So we have, right now we do connect with Lowell Regional Transit. And for example, even one of our riders, for example, comes down from Lowell to work at a cafe in Lexington, but really it's kind of challenging to go north and south. Like if you want to go Waltham up to Burlington or vice versa, it's really tough. We had a gentleman who I didn't realize used to use our service. He lived in Chelmsford. He called us when we had closed down for COVID. He lived in Chelmsford and he would go to Waltham on our service, which is, let me tell you, quite a feat, because he had to take the Lowell Regional Transit to Burlington, connect to our service, get as far south as he could on our service, and then walk over to what is the 61. That's really quite a task. You're very transit dependent if you're doing all of that. So it's really hard. Even to go someplace as close to Lexington as Belmont, you have to go all the way into Cambridge and then come back out. And this is a case where I know I've spoken with a gentleman who does a special needs program here at our facility, and he can take public transportation, prefers to take it, but he ends up taking the ride for that program because it's just way too challenging to take fixed route transportation. So I really think there's that. The other thing is, I wonder if there's an opportunity to look at some of the new development patterns as as the MBTA is looking at their bus network redesign, because I know, for example, Woburn, very close to us, just over the Lexington border along Lexington Street, has seen a huge amount of development. And, and then there's other places where we now have some new development that maybe didn't exist when these routes were first developed. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Go to Melissa, because I think you want to respond to what Susan said, and then Bill.
Thanks for that. Those were some 3 great points, Sue. And I wanted to kind of put in another plug for bus network redesign, because thinking about all-day frequency is absolutely something that we're very much looking at as part of the bus network redesign process. Our existing network is very 9 to 5 work commuter focused, and we really want to be a network that works for people who have their weekend jobs, or people who are taking a variety of trips, not just those 9 to 5 commuters, but people who are getting to their grocery store jobs like you were mentioning. So absolutely, I don't have a specific thing that I can tell you yet, but just that we're very much looking at expanding the list of towns where we have, Sunday service, and could we run hypothetically, the exact same schedule on Sundays that we run on Saturday? Those are the types of changes that we're looking at doing. Now, there's some trade-offs involved. It means that we'd be kind of shifting some of our peak resources into other times of the day, or it means, more resources, which we have a tension right now between wanting to kind of do so much more, and we're figuring out all those trade-offs. So that's something that we're absolutely looking at. One of the other things is about looking at development. Right now, the bus network redesign process is really focused on looking at travel demand data, which is a different way of doing things. So not just ridership data, as in who's riding our buses or in subways, because inherent in that is an assumption that the route exists. And what do you do to measure the demand where the route doesn't exist? So we've been doing a lot with the cell phone data to try to see, where is travel, not just on transit, but on bike, ped, motorist trips, all the travel with folks who are kind of moving around with their cell phone in their pocket, so that we can try to see, where are those gaps in the network that we're not serving really well. So I think that's something that's really exciting. Now, one thing inherent in that is that it only accounts for the travel that exists. So for new development that's in the pipeline, or that wasn't online as of 2019, when we kind of took our snapshot of pre-COVID data that we're using for this, it means that if we know that there is permitted development, that's something that we've been kind of coordinating with our municipal partners to get a better understanding of, so that we can just kind of take that information into account. Because it's not in the main data source that we're looking at, but we're very interested to know what's teed up in the future. Those were the main things. I had one more, but it escaped me before I could write it down, so I will stop there.
All right, well, thank you, Melissa. And yeah, I'm sure that you, Melissa, and other MBTA folks are familiar with mass builds from our colleagues over at MAPC, but I'm just going to put that in the chat. That's a link to their database that they really put a lot of work into current and future development, which could be very helpful for a lot of folks, especially if you're not familiar with it yet. Bill, you've had your hand up for quite a while.
Yeah, thanks, Sandy. So one of the areas that we've looked at down our way is bettering the connection between the Brockton area and the Braintree Quincy area. We've seen a lot of growth in that Quincy area, both jobs and services like medical services and whatnot, and seeing increasing demand. And there is service. There's one. I want to say it's the 238. I'm not sure. There's one MBTA bus that comes down out of that area. It comes down Route 37 into Brockton, but it stops at the Montello commuter rail station. If you're familiar with Brockton, the Montello station is about 3 miles outside of the downtown. So it's certainly what we would probably describe as a disjoint service. Brockton area transit does go up to the Montello station, but those making those connections can be a little challenging sometimes for riders. So one of the things we've looked at is increasing that bettering that service. And I think that's evident. I think the need for that is evidenced by just Route 37 itself from Brockton up into Quincy, is just seeing how congested that corridor is becoming during peak hours. I think does show that that demand for travel between these two regions. So that's, at least in our region, that's one area that we're looking at.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. And I think that really goes to the mission of what we're trying to do here, because we're talking about the seam between BAT and MBTA service, and also the factor of, you're talking about bus service interacting with rail service, which both have transformative planning processes going on right now. So there's a lot of coordination to do between all those different entities.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for bringing that up. All right, does anybody else have any specific corridors or locations they want to bring up? All right, so let's go on. Oh, Franny, is that a hand?
I just wanted to put a plug in for congested areas, parallel fixed route like 128, 495. It's just, I'm just always amazed that there is no transportation along those routes.
All right, so let's go on to the next discussion question. How can regional transit operators provide seamless connections for riders? And this is really a strategy question, less a identify problems question, and more of a what are some tactics or ideas that you have for starting to solve those problems, not in a specific way for a specific location, but generally speaking, is there anything that you've done that has been successful? Is there anything that you've seen done elsewhere that you would like to imitate? Is there anything that you're curious about and would like to try? And again, feel free to just speak up or use the Zoom function to raise your hand. Yeah, Colette?
So, I mean, Sandy, I'm a consumer on the side of the municipality, so I don't know how practical this is. And again, Emily's going to laugh because we've talked about this before. But when you're the user that's trying to use transportation, it's just really hard when there's so many different RTAs. Everyone has a different website. Everybody has a different payment mechanism. Everyone has a different fee structure. And if you're going between the MBTA plus, we have a micro transit we're piloting right now. It's our own software. And then you get into Newton and they have their micro transit, which is a different software. It's just really hard to navigate, I think, and it gets confusing. And there are great apps you can use that can help you plan a trip, but sometimes the transport doesn't show up there. So like our pilot for micro transit doesn't show up on this great app called Move It. And so if you're trying to plan your trip from point A to point B, and you're not really very well versed in transit, it's just really challenging. So, could there be an overarching website redesign for all the RTAs with some support from the MPO? Could there be an overarching marketing campaign with some help from the MPO? I think it's hard to ask all the RTAs to become experts on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and, I'm going to forget the name, TikTok. If we're going to try and get people that aren't super transit dependent out of their cars, they're going to need to know about this service, and we're going to have to market that to them. And I think that there could be there's a real opportunity for working across all the RTAs and making it less fractionalized, and RTA versus MBTA versus VIA, and we just got to pull it all together and make it easy for people to get out their car.
Yeah, thank you, Colette. That is incredibly important, the rider perspective, and certainly the need for consistent information, branding, and systems, both ticketing systems and riding systems, is something that we hear a lot about. I know that there's a couple of projects that have been launched to look at that in specific parts of the region. It's something that we at the MPO are starting to take a very initial look at as well, because it is critically important. So I thought, Stephanie, you had your hand up?
Yeah, actually, I just want to bounce my point off of Colette's as well too. With and I think of Mass Hire, and they were going through a similar thing a couple of years ago where they had 13 different workforce boards, and it was very confusing for the users, for the companies, and they rebranded it so it's all under Mass Hire. And I always wonder why the RTAs didn't do something like that as well too, just to make it easier. But that was one. But then again, using Mass Hire as an example too, that a lot of what they're saying to us now is that they need to make certain that they have an end user at the end of the day for training grants and such. And I guess I'm wondering with the RTAs is how much are the businesses and the real estate developers, how much are they at the table and paying into the system? So if a bus service is going by a new development, are they paying into the system with that as well too? And Melissa, I know that you talk a lot of, you were talking earlier about trying to accommodate not just the 9-to-5ers, but from where I'm sitting, that's my concern, is trying to make certain that the workers have access. And so I guess I'm wondering how much are the new developments being taken into account in terms of where the new jobs are? Will the transportation meet the needs for the new developments? I don't know if I worded that right, but Sandy, hopefully you got what I'm trying to say.
I do. I think I do get it. And as you know, Stephanie, one of the other hats that I wear at the MPO is that I do a lot of our travel demand management work. And I think the first answer that I have to that question is that because the development review process is run at the municipal level predominantly, except for the very largest developments that are subject to MEPA and are regulated at the state level and have involvement from MassDOT. It really is done, it varies from municipality to municipality. Different municipalities have different requirements for development. And there isn't necessarily a comprehensive regional approach. But I don't know if any of our RTA representatives here would like to speak to that. Do you get any funding from new developments? How do you interact with the development process, if at all?
And I'll just throw in, I know with Burlington, for example, and they bounced it, they took it from Woburn, of all places, that when a company is over a certain amount of square footage of jobs, they require them to be part of the TMA. And so it's just, they're part of the problem, so they should be part of the solution, that type of thing. So, and that's the time to get them, right, is when they are creating a development. And when people don't have their pattern set to get to work. So it's just one example, but I don't know if it's something that other communities have looked at.
Yeah, I think a few other places have required membership in TMAs. I know Everett has been looking at that, and I know up in Crosstown Connect area. So did anybody else want to speak to that?
Melissa here. We've been also thinking about development and how we can try to harness that development to create a network that's better. And we'd experimented with a couple examples where we actually got operating subsidies, though they've been very limited. And I don't know that that's something that we're planning to, well, I'm pretty sure that's something we're not looking to reproduce further. So for example, the casino was paying for increased Orange Line service. But I think moving forward, the intention is to try to focus instead on capital. So how can we, get future development to pay for transit priority treatments or bus shelters or bus, lanes or signal priority or accessible stops? And then just making sure we have to be careful as we're doing this, that those improvements are in the places that we think already makes sense to add service, because we don't necessarily want to pull into every shopping center and make routes that take forever to get anywhere. So how can we make sure that the future developments are sort of done in a transit friendly sort of way where, maybe there's a main road, and can you make sure that there's good sidewalks out to that main road that are accessible and pleasant and that have nice shelters, and it doesn't feel like you're standing on the highway, so that you can do something that's sort of operator friendly, but also passenger friendly. That's something that we're still grappling with.
Yeah, thank you for chiming in, Melissa. All right. We'll go to Susan, I guess, next. So you have your hand up.
I was going to respond to the original question, but I'll just follow up on that one. So we do have a process that developers go through this TDM process. And there's usually a memorandum of understanding developed, and most of them, will, I believe, will join the RTMA, and they are usually supposed to contribute some sort of funding into a transportation mitigation fund. But recently, that's also coupled with, 5-story parking garages. So, I mean, it's one thing can negate the other, in my opinion. So anyways, but a question for you, Sandy. Well, the original question is how can regional, we're only talking about fixed route, right? We're not talking about other transportation service coordination. Is that correct?
Oh, if you want to open up to other coordination, that would be fine. I think we don't want to go down a rat hole about or anything, but
no,
I want to mention it briefly. That would be fine.
I just wasn't sure. Well, I had some things though in regards to fixed route service. So one is, and I know the MBTA is looking at this, like coming up with like where it would make sense to have high frequency corridors. And I think that's really great because when you have a lot of services that are low frequency, trying to make connections is really challenging. Like we do connect, for example, this RL Express with the LRTA, but it's challenging. If you miss that connection, each one of those services is every hour. I would love to be able to better connect to like the 351, for example. And so, and I think one of the things we can do is very low tech. It's just like as we're developing our schedules, just reach out to each other and be like, okay, I see where these services are. Let me contact the operators to see what we can do. Although I do also would like to see more integrated technology, and I hear it's going to be much farther off than I had hoped for some kind of integrated payment, fair payment for these services. And, I'll just leave it at that. I won't go at the rabbit hole of the demand response services yet.
Yeah, thank you, Susan. And I think, we're all kind of waiting to see what happens with bus network redesign and how other operators are going to reconfigure their networks in response to what the T does. Because you guys, everybody's going to end up working together in some response, some way. So, anybody else want to speak to this question? All right. So, who can champion regional coordination efforts? And again, this is a looking forward and looking back. What have you seen that's been successful at creating regional coordination, and who are you looking to going forward in your own service area, and or efforts that you're aware of elsewhere? Just kind of where do you look for inspiration? Yeah, Franny.
Well, we've moved forward when we have had a regional grant to help us. When we've been working together, seeking funding, multiple communities. That seems to be the times that we have made the most progress. And I mean, who can champion anybody who's has the energy and interest? I mean, sometimes I see it as a staff member, and sometimes I see it as an individual. But the times that we've made those giant steps is when, first of all, when town staff are involved, and when there is some common goal with a lot of communities, either at community compact grants, at Metropolitan Area Planning Council grants, the MPO's suburban mobility grant in the past, the efficiency and regionalization grants. Anyway, that kind of joint effort to me seems like a way to move forward on big things, but with whoever is championing it.
So putting some money on the table, the people follow the money. Brandy, have you found that there's a particular type of town staff who we would need to be looking to? Is there, I know I often work with town planners. Obviously, some towns have specific transportation staff, like Susan, but not everybody does. Town managers, is there any consistent trend in who are the best people to talk to, or is it just whoever happens to be interested?
Whoever happens to be interested in that the town manager identifies. I've seen it be a health director, town planners. Sometimes it's the town manager themselves in some communities, the senior directors. I mean, it varies so much town to town. It seems to me, there's no rule except that they have persistence.
And don't forget economic development directors too.
Yeah, and that was not a complete list. So yeah, I would love if people would throw out other people into the air.
One of the things I've wondered about is if one of the reasons we have studied this for so long, if I think decades, I've seen so many studies about regionalizing, and I've wondered, why has it been so hard? Why have there been studies that then just go on shelves and we don't make progress with them? And one of the things I've wondered about is it because once you get down to that municipal level, there really is no one set person in charge? Like, unlike a fire department, if you wanted your fire departments to collaborate, you'd go to your fire chiefs, right? But you don't really have that same equivalent in a town. The MBTA just sent out a survey of give us your contacts for different things, right? And I responded to that and I had 6 different contacts and then realized I left off a 7th. So, I mean, that's, I think, kind of the, I think something that's a little bit challenging. And like, I have transportation in my title, but like, I also schedule podiatry appointments and things like that. I mean, it's like what we do, what town staff does wearing a transportation has a little bit different. And in some towns, you'll have planners that'll be like really understand transportation and transit. And then in others, not so much. And so, it would seem like your planning staff would be like the go-to. And in some communities that may work, and in others, it may not. So when I look at, who can champion the efforts, I think, I'll take anyone, but I kind of am finding like where we are, we need some external help, people from above, like from your agency, right? We need help from those regional authorities, from electeds, and then we need kind of the grassroots and the staff support, and then just kind of smush everyone in between. That's what I'm thinking right now.
From the grassroots up and from the top down. Yes. All right, Colette.
And I guess that was really interesting, Susan, because I was thinking of it from external, outside of the town, but you're right. We would love to have a transportation planner, just someone in your role, but it's me and the town's executive director and staff. But so thinking about some of the things we talked about earlier in terms of trying to work together more seamlessly, I know there is a sort of umbrella organization for the RTAs. I don't know much about it because I'm sort of somewhat new to this, but if we're trying to do some cross RTA initiatives, is there a role for that organization, or does it fall to the MPO just to say, all right, let's get together and have a joint marketing plan, or a joint website update, or a joint fee structure or fee mechanism, or application that we're going to use? There definitely seems to be a role there for coordinating amongst the RTAs and supporting each other. And I don't know who that should be, but it seems like it's a shame to expend so much effort in each organization trying to develop the same skills. That these are not easy skills to develop. And I'd love to hear what the RTAs say about it, because I'm looking at it from the outside.
Yeah, thank you, Colette. I know there's the RTA Council that's run out of MassDOT's Rail and Transit Division. Ellie McCarthy manages that. And then there's also MARTA, the Association for the RTAs. But do any of our RTA reps want to speak to that?
Hi, Sandy. No, that's a perfect answer. Yeah, we have a couple different groups that we use to coordinate with one another. And MARTA is all of the RTAs collaboratively, but also, yeah, Sandy, the RTA Council.
Great. Hey, Franny, was your hand up from before, or did you have something else you wanted to say?
Well, it was from before, but I was just starting to write in the chat that in addition, we also have the, recently I joined the RTA Advisory Account, no, Advocates Coalition, RTAAC, which is being run by the Massachusetts Public Health Association, Alexis Walls, and also T4MA. So that's yet another. And I know that Jeanette Orsino from MARTA tends to come to those meetings. But so I've found that useful also. I don't know how much crossover there is between the council, who's on the council, and who comes to those meetings.
And I guess one question from our more TMA oriented folks is how much contact is there between those kind of RTA overarching groups and the coordination that you do amongst yourselves in the TMA world?
And why are there so many? Why isn't there just one so we can all focus on one place?
And why do we have TMAs? I mean, it's in my fantasy, uneducated mind, the RTAs and MBTA should encompass all the work that the TMAs are doing. Tell me if you professionals in the RTA and TMA world want to immediately argue with me.
I would like to agree with you, actually, because we created our TMA not because we wanted to, but we did it because that's what we heard from the business community, is that they needed more resources. And so our role is really just pulling the businesses together to chip in and to fund these shuttles. In theory, it would make a lot of sense. On one hand, it would make a lot of sense for it to be under an RTA, but the RTAs don't work with the business communities the same way that we do. And that's really what it's all about for us. I mean, I know Crosstown is a little different as well, too. But on the other hand, part of the frustration that we have is all these borders. And that's one reason we were started, is because we're in the middle of so many different borders, whether it be for our planning or for our workforce or for our transportation. So we're trying to connect the borders too.
Hi, Jeff.
Thanks, Stephanie. You kind of gave a lot of the response I was going to give. I think in some ways we're on the same page. I mean, something in both of the TMAs I've worked at, we've always said that we would see it actually as in the long run a mark of success if some of what we did was put out of business by a local transit authority, the transit authority government, serving that area, effectively replacing one of our services. That said, 128 Business Council has been around for over 30 years. We're still here. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon for all the reasons that Stephanie outlined. There's still a lot of demand, and it's often very specific demand to very specific businesses. And, we are doing the best that we can to create options that address those specific demands of the businesses while still making it a publicly accessible service. But right now we're, that's who's funding, the majority of our service. So that's what guides where we're running. So, the TMAs always are unique creatures in this environment. So go on further, but then would just get into, further into the weeds in a rather large discussion.
Sounds to me like there's a PhD dissertation to be written about this.
Yeah, if throw that out there for somebody who's really interested in going down that direction and doesn't have day-to-day operations to deal with.
All right, Susan.
I agree with Jeff and Stephanie, and we love our TMA friends. We work most closely with Jeff and his team, but in my perfect world, we would just have fewer transit operators, even including I would, as much as I love operating L'Express, if that could just merge into something else, and you have less brands, less apps, less payment systems, it would just be so much easier on the riders. And in terms of how the heck do we pay for this when you have, with the TMA model, that, they are working closely and building these partnerships with businesses. Isn't there something we can take from that and move that, transition some of that into our RTAs and MBTA? One of the things I've wondered about is more of a employment transit tax. I know people don't like the word tax, but we had a transit tax in Oregon, and it just seems like instead of bickering every time you get a development, it's just kind of built into your funding system. So I'm just curious, about that and how that might work here.
I think that's not a question we're going to be able to unlock with 5 minutes left in the session. I do want to offer an opportunity to, I think we've kind of touched on it, but to specifically bring up items about coordination between the MBTA and RTAs from either side, whether we have any RTA folks who would like to talk to our MBTA colleagues or vice versa. If anybody wants to bring that up, and if not, then we'll go to Franny. And then I have one more slide to close out.
Oh, I was just going to ask if, I know RTAs and MBTA use state and federal money. Is there any rule against them receiving other money, and all the money that goes into TMAs, if it went into the RTAs instead for a combined service, would that be legal?
I'm not familiar with any particular rules against it.
I'm sorry, Franny, could you repeat that?
Oh, just if the work of the TMAs and the funding, whatever funding you have to run the TMA, instead went to the RTAs, and they were just combining them, is there any legal setup that prevents that?
Well, the only money I get is from the private sector. I don't get any public money to run the TMAs.
So that's what I mean. If the private sector money went instead to the RTAs.
But the only reason that they're giving us money is to run a shuttle for their company. And I don't think they necessarily care. In fact, we've had developers ask our local RTAs, what happens if I were to give you money to come to our site? And the response was, nobody ever asked me that before. And so nothing ever happened. But yeah, but we don't have public money, so I don't see that there would be any rules to prohibit it.
Let's go to Jeff very briefly, and then we're going to wrap up. But I will say that we are going to continue this conversation. This has been great.
Yeah, that's great, Sandy, because I think this could go, especially some of the topics we got into here at the end could go on much further. Just, echoing what Stephanie said, we are, aside from a small contribution from Lexington that is focused on certain particular services, we're, again, really where we're serving the town of Lexington as a TMA member. The majority of our funding is private sector, and it's very focused on specific services to specific companies. And so also, I'm going way back into my memory over the years. I don't know that there really is necessarily for a lot of the public transit agencies in Massachusetts a mechanism to accept funding from the private sector, in the same way that a TMA can respond and say, okay, I have this business, I have this site that's opening, I need transit service. We can come in and we can set that service up in a matter of, months or weeks. I don't think that right now, the way everything is structured by these agencies, that they could really respond in that same way. And again, that's sort of, they're filling very, very different roles in, layers of transportation service. So I'm going to stop there because that's getting getting more complicated if I keep going.
All right. Well, yeah, I think we have lots of topics to explore. And Matt, if we can just go to the next slide. So we have a couple of more coffee chats coming up on the 17th. We've heard kind of loud and clear, lots of folks are struggling with recruiting enough drivers and operators. Want to give folks a chance to talk about that. I know it's been discussed at the RTA Council as well. And then in December, talking about recovery from COVID-19. But also, I just want to make clear that there's a lot of things that came up here, and I think we're just starting to dig into them. And we'll bring this group back together. We'll put out another invite probably not for another month or two, but it sounds like there's enough discussions to have enough need that this can and should become a recurring event. And thank you, everybody. This has been really fantastic, and I look forward to talking more to all of you in the future. So have a great night.
Thanks, Andy.
Thank you.
Thank you.